Hello. Welcome. I should say, excuse me. Another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 319. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week is Gayle from Communities Digital News. What's going on, Gayle?
Hey, good evening, everybody. If it's Monday night, it's time for the Pound for Pound Boxing Report.
Absolutely. We hope to have Daniel on a little bit later on the show. He has some business to attend to. Again, hopefully we can have him later on in the show. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, and website talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. The best place to check out all the information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report is the website. Still under construction, still working on things behind the scenes, but I got it open as public now. P4pboxingreport.com. That's the link, P4pboxingreport.com. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, if you scroll on the top of the page, you'll see links to where to find us all on any podcast, on any platforms that carry podcasts. You know, your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify's, your Google Podcasts, and any and everything in between. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find links to where to find us all over social media. The Facebook page, the YouTube page, the Twitter page, the Instagram page. Also where you can donate. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. Let donation be the best nation. Use some of that stimulus money if you have some to spare. Shoot a
now we're talking. There you go. Creativity and action.
Shoot a couple of dollars if you can spare to our way at Pound for Pound Box Report. It'll help the overall production behind the scenes. If you check us out on places like iTunes, please follow us there on iTunes and Spotify. Please make sure to leave a review on iTunes. 5-star review will get read. We'll love to read your comments, your questions, and or your comments about what you like, what you don't like about the show, and what we can do behind the scenes and on air to improve the show. And last but certainly not least, I am an online coach for Beachbody. If you're looking to get yourself into shape or improve your fitness game, check out Beachbody On Demand. It has any and all programs to cater to any fitness goals or interests. My online coaching page is also on the Pound for Pound Box Report website towards the bottom portion of the page. So yeah, if you're interested in the fitness and you're interested in taking a part of any of my Let's Build Together group fitness challenges, please check me out. All that on Pound for Pound Box Report website. Let's get things going. Venturing to Texas, and I see Daniel's getting ready to join us. Let me get him in here. What's going on, Daniel? What's going on?
Hey, folks.
Indeed. So as I was saying, let's start things by going to Texas, America's Airlines arena, or center, I should say, to be exact. We always start the show with ladies first. Vergil Ortiz, light welterweight contender now. He's no longer a prospect. Facing on paper the biggest test of his career against Maurice Hooker. 12-round contest. Hooker gave early on, Gayle, he gave a good account for himself. We previewed this fight a lot last week, but as the rounds went on, you could see that Ortiz was starting to figure some things out. Hooker's liability, in my opinion, is that yes, he's tall, and yes, he has good length, and he has good power, but he doesn't have the discipline to use those physical advantages throughout a fight. He can get hit, and once you hit him, you can you can hurt him, right? It's that lack of discipline that cost him in the fight, in the loss, unification loss to Ramirez, right? He was doing well early, but he got a little greedy, and Ramirez caught him and took advantage. And in this case, he tried to stay disciplined, but in my opinion, Ortiz, from an offensive perspective, is more advanced than Ramirez. He was able to get to him with body shots. That's how I eventually took him out in the 7th round. Your impressions not just of Hooker and what caused his defeat, but more importantly, the the advancement of Ortiz. What did you see? Did you see anything different? Any kind of improvements from this fight as compared to his previous outings?
Well, Ortiz had to work a little bit harder to get Hooker out of there, and that was the intention. The matchmakers at Golden Boy wanted to see him go a few more rounds, sweat a little harder, throw a few more punches, and get some work. In all of Ortiz's fights, all of which have ended in stoppage, none of the last 4 12-round fights have gone beyond the 7th round. Ortiz Jr.'s never gone beyond the 7th round. There was a hope he might get beyond that, that barrier on Saturday. I mean, he didn't. And as in all fights where you've got 2 different styles with opponents that, in theory, are both competitive, it is always the fighter who imposes his version of the game plan who wins. And that's what Ortiz Jr. did. Hooker should have used his reach, which is far greater than Ortiz Jr. Hooker has some freaky long arms. He's taller. And he should have made this a technical, boring fight. He should have jabbed, and made Ortiz frustrated and reckless when he still had an arsenal to come after him. Instead, Hooker let himself be pulled into a firefight with Ortiz Jr., and it didn't go well for him. Ortiz said after the fight that, to Hooker's credit, he absolutely can take a punch, and he did, especially to the head. So Ortiz was forced to start going to the body, which is what he should have done in the first place, although it meant that he had to move in on Hooker and crowd him to get there. But he was successful in doing that. Hooker was not about to step back. Perhaps it's just that fighter's instinct. Somebody starts tagging you to the body. It pisses you off. You don't like it, and you want to retaliate. But that was not the game plan for Hooker. And that's eventually what cost him the fight. Ortiz kept putting that money in the bank, all those body shots. And then when he was able to get to him, after he'd worn him down sufficiently and tagged him in just that right spot, he dropped him on a body shot in the 6th round. Hooker did get up. He's very lucky it was near the end of the round. Handwriting was on the wall. He decided to come out for the 7th, blasting away, crazy, and he threw a wild punch that landed awkwardly to the top of Ortiz Jr.'s head. He obviously reacted in pain. He'd done something to his hand, his elbow. I've never gotten a full report exactly what it was. He had to take a knee, and he didn't get up. Maybe he decided, you know what? I don't want no more of this. I'm losing the fight. It's a matter of time. My hand hurts like hell. I'm done. So it was a polite undercover no moss, if you ask me, by Hooker. And, I don't blame him. He was going to lose that fight eventually. Ortiz did take some damage. Hooker did tag him. And that's not a bad thing. For everybody who said, look at Ortiz Jr.'s face. He was all marked up. Well, first of all, Ortiz is a really pale Mexican. I'm just going to say that. He's a guy whose face is going to get marked up with the least little hurt on it. But he was hit hard multiple times. In fact, in the 4th round, Hooker outlanded him quite a bit. And he landed some good hard power shots. That is perfect at this stage of Ortiz Jr.'s career. That is not a bad thing. First of all, he's going to learn from it because he's not going to want to get hit that way by anyone who punches harder and more accurately in the future. Terence, Crawford, Earl Spence. But it also proves whether Ortiz Jr. can take a shot And he showed he's got a damn good chin. That is an asset. And that is a message to the rest of the welterweight division. Who was there, which we can talk about after we finish our review. So a very good outing for Ortiz Jr., who now is calling out the big names. Should he do it? Should he not? There are differences of opinion on that.
To many, Daniel, the best thing that Hooker provided during the entire show was his comments during the post fight. That bit of hilarity. I guess he wanted to make his best Stone Cold Steve Austin impersonation, right? The focus for many was on Ortiz, both before the fight, during the fight, and we'll talk about it in a bit after the fight. Watching him over the years, what grade would you give him in terms of this stoppage win over Hooker?
The grade you probably would give is most likely a B, because it's a situation right now where this was his biggest step up fight. It does show that he can, unfortunately, this is the big complaint when it comes to Robert Garcia fighters, that he can be hit and he can be outboxed in certain ways by a person that knows how to use his skill set. The thing is, unfortunately, Hooker tends to be, and he showed this in this fight, and he showed this in Ramirez fight. Sometimes he's too brave for his own good. In that respect, because personally, through the first 4 rounds, I could give to Hooker. Like 3 out of the first 4 rounds, I could give to Hooker because he was out jabbing Ortiz, and Ortiz was, and especially in his post-fight interview, acknowledging he was gunning for headshots early. It wasn't until he got into the late 4th round, so 3rd and 4th round, where he started going to the body, when realizing that the headshots were not taking Hooker out as much as he thought they were going to be. And Hooker was going to the game plan, but unfortunately, he got too brave. He decided to trade, and eventually, the first knockdown, started with a little shot right above the temple, and then it led Ortiz land a barrage, and even a couple of punches after Hooker went down, which he complained about, and then the knockdown that ended it. Looking at it, I first thought it was his left hand at first, because his left hand hit Ortiz on the hip. And thought, oh, okay, that explains the hand. Yeah, he hit a really tough bone. But it's his right hand that's a little bit done. But looking at those scorecards, yeah, there was no way Hooker needed a knockout to win, even though he did a pretty good job early on in the fight. Eventually, Ortiz decided to adjust and start investing to the body.
Yeah, your audio is going in and out on this, Daniel. It's fading.
But what about now?
It's better now.
Okay. It's a situation, like I said, where Ortiz adjusted. He adjusted it well enough where he slowed Hooker down to the point where it no longer became a fight where he can jab and out point. And it's good on because it's a good learning experience. You don't need to gun away headshots, and you need to probably get a little bit more endurance, because there could be a risk at that point where he might have tired out and let Hooker back into the fight. And if Hooker did not hurt his hand, there would have been a chance that Hooker might have landed something, and it might have bothered Ortiz if he was tired. So it's a good learning experience. You can say a B.
I'll send this question to both of you. As I mentioned during my question of Daniel, much of the focus was on Ortiz before, during, and afterwards, right? Well, 2 prominent welterweights in particular happened to be in attendance in Dallas for the fight, which was aired on the Zone. Unified welterweight champion Errol Spence. For those who don't know, Spence holds both the IBF and the WBC belt. And also in attendance was a WBO welterweight champion Terence Bud Crawford. While both Crawford and Spence was there, much of the attention was paid towards Crawford. In the lead up, Rodriguez said that he would like to fight Bud Crawford. DAZN made sure to show Crawford a lot during that fight. Crawford was interviewed after during the event, and they and during the post fight interview with Ortiz, his name came up again, and Ortiz said, in essence, paraphrasing, yes, I would love to fight him, and I would love to fight him next. Crawford was barking at ringside. He was talking to media members after the fight, saying that Ortiz, it was a nice win, it was a good win, but he ain't ready. Here's the question to both of you. Is he ready? Should Golden Boy make moves to put their charge in the ring with Crawford next? And while we all know, well, I'll ask the second question later on. But to my first question, Gayle, Daniel, whoever wants to respond first, please do.
When Ortiz was asked about this, and the follow-up question was, well, do you think you're ready? His answer was perfection. I don't care if I'm ready. I want that fight. That is the attitude that this hard-charging younger generation of fighters has, and good for them. He's absolutely right on that level from an athletic point of view. He wants to challenge himself. And he says, I don't care if I'm ready. I want my shot. You know, I'm not going to give up my shot, and I want to take him on. However, the promoter gets a say. And without Canelo in the stable, Golden Boy's talent pool is a tiny bit fragile. They're still looking to figure out who are the big stars, the big money guys. And their bigger names on the roster are a few years away at best from the same kind of status, if not the actual earning power that Canelo had. Well, look back at Canelo at age 22 and where he was. So that is no shame or shade thrown on Ortiz Jr., far from it. I could argue that Ortiz Jr. is farther along at 22 than Canelo was at 22. But he's 22. So is Ryan Garcia. They've now got Gilberto Ramirez in the stable. Maybe he ends up doing better for them than he did under Top Rank. Maybe not. Jaime Munguia is still at play. You see a few other guys rising from underneath their ranks. I really like their young cruiserweight who was the opening bout, Tristan Calcruth, who's also from Texas. You still have Joseph Diaz Jr. in there, etc. Let me end it there. From the promoter standpoint, to land Ortiz Jr. with an L on his record at this point, that would make them very nervous. So no, I don't think it's going to happen. And the consensus is he maybe needs a couple more fights. I've heard Jesse Vargas's name thrown out there. I wouldn't hate that fight for Ortiz Jr. at this point. That's a good test fight for him. But I like the attitude that he wants Crawford, and he really doesn't give a shit whether anybody else thinks he's ready. He wants to see what he's made of, and good for him.
I'll go to you, Daniel. I pretty much had the same opinion and same thoughts on this as Gayle, and then I was in a meeting with the fellas from Three Kings boxing last evening during the meeting, and shout out to the man behind Three Kings. He brought up a good point that's making me have a bit of a change of heart. Gayle mentioned maybe Ortiz should fight the likes of a Jesse Vargas to kind of season him and whatnot. And 2K was relaying to me specifically that what is he going to prove? How is he going to get better, essentially, from fighting Ortiz? There's other fighters that's being mentioned, and his thing is that Vergil Ortiz, he performed more than adequately enough against Hooker, and that all these other guys that they're mentioning, who are not necessarily challengers or not necessarily world champions and whatnot. He believes that his progress will stagnate if he fights the likes of Jesse Vargas. He's not going to learn anything that would help him prepare for the likes of Crawford. So he says because of how he looked, because of his ranking, he's ranked number 2 by the BO. Why not put him in there? If Golden Boy feels that he wants that he's ready, if he feels that he's ready, there's nobody really around that's going to help him prepare for the likes of Crawford. That's going to build him up even more. Gamble and take the shot.
From a fighter standpoint, yeah, I would agree. Like if you're in a fighter standpoint now, at least in the part of me I remember, like Vergil didn't flat out say I want Crawford. He said like I think from what he said was whatever happened like happens, like whether he's ready or not, he's willing to do it. And but then that's when they focused on Crawford in the camera, and then they started the jawing back and forth. That's where the area got riled up into it. And Crawford, I think, said like he's got bigger fish to fry. But if I'm Golden Boy right now, I'm not putting him in any title fights until at least later this year or early 2022. Get him in a ring with a couple of other people. Jesse Vargas is not going to do anything for him. There's a couple of other fighters that might be able to do for him, but yeah, all of them, like all the fights we mentioned, involves Oscar working with Al. Barring anything as far as injury wise, Keith Thurman or Danny Garcia. Both are still like relatively on the younger part in that area. Both are world champions, recently. And it's not a situation where either one of them is protecting an undefeated record. This could be their shot to put themselves into the sweepstakes back again, particularly for Thurman. But those are the fights that I would look into, like I said, for Vergil to get into to see how he's going to look against what can be considered world caliber competition, because while Hooker and Bud may have like similarities as far as body type and the style of fights, Bud has a mean streak in him that he can turn that on in a minute. Like we know how it looks when it comes to Bud. As soon as he turns southpaw, the fight's over. I would avoid that area. If you can put him in the Spence area, okay, I could see him doing that, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it this year. I would do it either very, very late this year or early 2022. Let him get a couple of other fights that can see how he actually looks if he makes adjustments against world caliber competition, and then position him for a world title fight. Because at the end of the day, Golden Boy needs to find that person that they can really, really rely on and say, like, okay, this is going to be the person that's going to guide through. Vergil has the most upside. Now, granted, like Gayle mentioned, there's still JoJo, there's still Munguia, there's still Ryan Garcia too. And Ryan Garcia has, like I said, right now probably has the most name recognition based on social media. So they have people lined up to try to take that mantle that Canelo left. They need to position a piece as well. So if the title comes, the title comes. But I would say not yet. Late 2021, early 2022.
Here, I want to kind of connect what we're just talking about to some of the comments that Bud said. Daniel, you mentioned that Crawford said that he has bigger fish to fry. They was talking to Crawford about the welterweight division. He was asked about a fight against Spence, who was, like I mentioned, was at ringside, and his attitude was like, never. That fight's never going to happen. I don't even want to talk about it. which ticked me off, quite frankly. That's the fight that folks really want to see in that division. Nah, man. You don't out publicly express this attitude like you've given up on that fight when he's obviously your best competition. He's obviously your toughest competition, and it's the competition you can probably make the most money against. But when he talks about he has bigger fish to fry than Ortiz, given the hype machine that we all know is going to come from him, come his way after the fight. Okay. Outside of Spence, outside of a fight with Pacquiao, which may or may not happen, more than likely not. What other bigger fish is there for him to fry? Particularly since Porter has been calling this dude's name out, and he hasn't talked much about Porter. So, in a strange way, while it may behoove Ortiz to wait in the cut and take this fight either later this year or early next year, from Crawford's perspective, given the limited options that he has, and some of that is his own doing, if we're really going to be honest, where does he go? Especially since the voices are getting louder and louder for him to fight somebody significant at welterweight.
Right. Where does Crawford have to go? I mean, his options are limited. The truth is, Ortiz Jr. has far more options than Crawford does. Crawford can't exactly be picky at this point. This is now starting to be a serious issue for Crawford being out of the ring this long. He can't blame the pandemic much longer. He has got to get in there with somebody. For Pete's sake, get the hell in the ring. I mean, this is incredibly frustrating. And I'm starting, at first I was very sympathetic to Crawford's complaints and the difficulties, getting the promotional arrangements together. I'm starting now to look over at Crawford's side and say, wait a minute, Bud, you have a lot of pull. If you want something to happen, it will happen. If you're going to need to take less money at this point, well, join the club. A lot of guys have taken less money and they're thinking long term. Yeah, you'd like to get more money right now for a fight. The guys that succeeded this last year, for the most part, were the men and women who said, listen, I get it. It's a pandemic. Budgets are constrained. I need to be in the ring. Better for me to keep my brand and keep my name alive and lively in the ring than out. We can add Canelo to that, for Pete's sake. So this is not a good look for Bud. The longer it goes on, the worse for him, and the less leverage he's going to have. You could say all you want that you don't think Ortiz Jr. is ready. Canelo wasn't ready for Mayweather, and it didn't hurt him one bit. With the value of hindsight, we're looking back saying that was the smartest damn thing he could have done at that age. What's holding Ortiz back is the fact that he plays such a big role in the Golden Boy stable. He and Ryan Garcia right now are their moneymakers, and they know it. And they're concerned about how he might look in a loss to Crawford. I think he'd give him a damn good fight. I think he might take him the distance. I do think he'd lose on the cards if it went the distance with Bud. But it would be close, and I don't think it would hurt him one bit. Otherwise, they're going to marinate the fight. They're going to give Ortiz a few more fights. Let him learn on the job. I'm not concerned about it. I think the promotional issues will prevent it. But if that wasn't the case, let him dance. I'm all for it.
What say you, Daniel, about the comments and the attitude that Bud is conveying out here in these boxing streets? Folks in the know, mainstream guys who may remember him for over the years, particularly at 140 and 135, they may pass it off. But those in the know is like, okay, you've been at welterweight now for a while now. There are contemporaries who are getting bigger fights. There are contemporaries who are making more money. Hell, there's young guys like Ortiz who's getting just as much attention, if not more, than you've been getting over the past year. Kell Brook, no disrespect, is not going to cut it. Amir Khan, that's not going to cut it. Mandatory aside, he has to fulfill those obligations, but yeah, he needs something. He needs something. And talking in this dismissive way about Spence, talking in this dismissive way about Ortiz, that ain't the move, bruh.
This is what makes part of difficult on it. This is like mainly for people to know, people that always been in the circles. Like for you to make Bud, like for Bud to be making this type of statement, just is saying that you got figure fish fight. The Spence thing I'll handle in a bit, but you got figure fish fight. That should tell me you do have something in the back burner. That should be enough to say, hey, okay, that's a bigger fish than Vergil Ortiz for now. Like Sean Porter could do that. That's been the fight that's been most talked about. We know Manny's not going to do it. Manny's not going to step in the ring with Bud. And while I mentioned like so people like Thurman, people like Garcia, when it came for Vergil Ortiz, they're not at the stage where they can challenge Bud right now. Like if anything, they need a fight with Ortiz in order to make their case. The Spence thing is what was starting to bother a lot of people because unfortunately, you've seen these two talk to each other. You've seen these two not have any problems getting in each other's face about certain things, but now you're starting to come out, and we know like there's always rumors about purse splits and all that. See who gets which in that area. It doesn't really matter at this point, like who gets the cut in that area. Everybody's kind of playing the same level field in a way. Like nobody's exactly selling out crowds now because right now there's nothing that you can do to sell out an arena because of the pandemic. And depending where you're at, okay, if you're happen to be in Australia, happen to be in New Zealand, okay, you can probably do that. But how many world caliber fighters are going to do that and say like, I need to fill a house. Let me go to New Zealand when their fans are going to go through like, or let me go to Saudi Arabia or Dubai. Like I know how they're talking about Adrian Fury. How many Brits are willing to fly for that fight to go to those countries right now, given their current situation? So nobody's has any real leverage as far as argument, like, except for a few fighters. Canelo being the main one. So that's the part that's bothering me. What most it tells me is that Bud, from a business standpoint, is saying, I don't want to bother with this anymore because every single time I fight, I'm going to get asked a question. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Crawford, the bad part about it is that statement you made, but it's going to cause people to ask that question even more now. Look at what happened with Floyd with Manny. Like he said all he wanted about not fighting Manny. The question always came up, if not more frequently, in the later years. So, Bud doesn't have a lot of avenues, unfortunately, and unless, like I say, he has a real rabbit out of a hat that he can say, here, this is what I have here in the back burner for you. There's not much you can say, especially that ace in the hole is not Errol Spence.
And it would be a damn shame if that ace in the hole was not one Errol Spence. And shame on all parties involved if that fight does not happen at 147 pounds, because more than anything, just as much as a proposed fight with Joshua and Fury, which we talked about a whole lot, the fight that's on the minds of boxing heads is a showdown between the undisputed Terence Crawford and the undisputed Errol Spence. And in terms of Vergil Ortiz, we will see where he goes next, and will moves be made outside the ring to truly pit him in the ring against one Terence Crawford. Stay tuned for pound box report for more updates on that situation. Let's move on to some other fights here. And I admit, because I was at work and I was covering other stuff, I wasn't able to check all of these fights in full. So I'm going to lean heavily on Gayle and Daniel for their analysis, starting with you, Gayle, on the undercard of Ortiz and Hooker. You had one Seniesa Estrada, got a lot of flack in her last bout. I can't remember the name of the woman she fought, but she basically bum rushed and knocked her out in 7 seconds.
Monica, a name that will live in infamy.
Exactly. She received a lot of flack for that because, again, she was a Bob Hope's a female cousin, No Hope, and but to her credit, she was put in position, Estrada, to get a world title shot. She moved down and away from 108 to 105, fighting long reigning WBA 105 champ Annabelle Ortiz. And to Estrada's credit, from everything I've read about it and from the highlights I saw of the fight, Estrada was impressive. This was a step up in competition. And Estrada kind of pulled out her Bud Crawford bag, going from orthodox to southpaw. Controlled matters all night long. I believe she scored a knockdown. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gayle. And this was a wipeout, unanimous decision for her. And fulfilling her dream, super bad, Estrada, she's a world champion.
She is indeed. Seniesa Estrada is the woman's professional boxer you tell people to watch who say, I don't like to watch women boxing. She is aggressive. She is an all offense fighter. She is skilled. She's fast. Her punches are accurate. And she punches as hard as any other man who weighs 105 pounds. I'll tell you what, there was some joking around on the broadcast about, I wonder how she'd look against Chocolatito. Well, that's a pretty bad idea. But you get the picture that they would even have that discussion about her. She's a very fan-friendly fighter. So she makes for terrific action, fun in the ring. The fans take to her. And she knew exactly what she wanted to do against a very good opponent. Annabelle Ortiz, that was the 13th defense of that title. 13 over 7 years. So maybe Ortiz, no relation to Vergil, by the way, is on the downswing of her career, it being that she is that much of a veteran. She is still considerably skilled, and she was absolutely overwhelmed by Estrada. It was a blowout, 100-89 on 2 of the 10-round cards, and there was a mercy round given to Ortiz on the 3rd. It was that dominant a fight. Estrada's always been an offense, all-action power puncher, but she's been fighting up in weight class because it has been so tough for her to get opponents. She fought Marlena Esparza and blew her out in their fight a year ago plus, but that was at 112. Marlene just fought at 118. She actually looked very good at 118. If I'm advising her, I would tell her to stay in a little higher weight division. But Estrada really is more a natural 108 and can make 105 no problem. She said she didn't struggle one bit. So this is the first step towards unification. That's what she wants. She wants one of the other gals with a belt. I think she probably will fight the Mexican champion, Esenia, next. That's a very makeable fight, very fan-friendly fight, especially in Southern California. She's going to end up having to fight the Japanese women eventually in both divisions. She wants to try to unify at 105 first, then 108, but I think she'd take anybody with a title, and she is a serious threat to anyone with a title. She's just an incredibly impressive fighter.
Indeed, and on another women's boxing note, I want to give a shout out to you, Gail. You showed me shared the link with me, and I wrote about this for Three Kings Boxing, and that is one Jackie Nava, who the Mexican princess, uh, um,
The
made
Aztec
her
princess, the
Aztec
Aztec princess
Aztec princess.
was
My
also
bad,
an
my bad.
Saturday night,
Right.
seen by very few people, but on Box Azteca, and she took her opponent apart too.
Right. And yeah, 40 years old. And she if you saw the fight, you can I believe the live link is still on Facebook. She still got the skills. No doubt about that. She may be 40, but she can still handle herself in the ring. No question about it. I'll go to you, Danny, to talk about this next fight. We're going to Russia here, specifically to talk one Artur Beterbiev, unified WBC IBF champion at 175. Fought think it was his mandatory by the name of Deines. Scored an early knockdown in round two, I believe. But from everything I read, he was patient, but he may have been a little bit too patient for what I was reading on the timeline and on the post fight recaps. He finally finished the job in round 10. Your impressions of what you saw from if you was able to see the fight with Beterbiev, was it a case of ring rust? Was Dean um, super conservative in there, not giving the champ enough openings to land a punch? Your thoughts?
It wasn't the latter in that area because Danes was more than willing to trade shots with Berturbiev. What happened, I think, to me is Berturbiev saw that he could knock him down in the second round, and this it was very late in the second round where he was able to do it, and then just figured he would probably cruise. But Danes proved to be a lot tougher than people gave him a lot of credit for, including us. I think he was able to. He even when Berturbia was starting to turn it on, started landing combinations, started landing uppercuts. Danes was still able to at least land a couple of shots in defense, especially trying to get out the ropes. Unfortunately, though, it took Berturbia's corner to tell him, "Hey, wake up!" To for Berturbia to finally turn it on. It ultimately put Danes out. It was a decent performance considering the amount of time Berturbiev was off. Nothing in that fight worry that he may not be ready for any actual challengers, whether it's trying to fight Joe Smith or fighting Bibble, or even like I said, that's Top Rank has been heavily heavily trying to publicize in that pay per view a potential super fight with Canelo. Nothing in that fight tells you that he wasn't ready for it, but he's a fighter that he needs to stay in the ring. He needs to stay in the ring. He needs to get a little bit better, a little bit better competition. But Danes, you are going to, you are definitely going to need to probably get a lot of sparring partners because guess what? That fight probably earned you a lot of fights for contenders, up and comers in that weight class. So it's a fight where there pretty much no winner. No, it's not so no winner. There really was no loser in the end, if you think about it.
All the talk of a possible fight with Canelo, of course, but it seems behind the scenes that Beterbiev will next fight the fight the winner of the fight the winner of the upcoming bout for the vacant WBO light heavyweight champion between Joe Smith and Maxim Vlasov. We will talk about that when the week that fight happens. I think Vlasov personally is going to give Smith a little bit tougher time than most people anticipate, but that's what I've been hearing, Daniel. Follow up questions. Is that more likely the case?
More likely, what case? Going for
That he
Canelo?
fights the winner of the fight between Smith Jr. and Velasov instead of trying to seek out this fight against Canelo, which let's face it, Canelo's card is pretty locked up for for 2021.
Yeah, it makes the most sense. It makes the most sense to go after that fight because you're going to get a tough out whoever wins it, especially if it's Joe Smith. You already have then a built-in America versus U.S. versus Russia narrative you can build into it, even if the fight's in the U.S. And even though, like we know, Beterbiev is mostly a Canadian satellite right now at this point, but that's probably the fight you're going to go after because first, to get to the fight with Canelo has to agree to go back to light heavyweight. And I think he's pretty comfortable right now, especially if he says what he wants to say, as far as completely unifying super middleweight. If that's the goal, then yeah, Beterbiev's not going to be it. Your goal then is to fight Caleb Plant in the end. So yeah, it shoots it into it. It stays within the same promotional sphere, and it'll be a good scrap either way in that prospect. And if anything, you'll probably position yourself a little bit more towards the more realistic fight, which is the fight with him in the end.
Let's move from Russia to England, and I have to say, Gail, we've hurled a lot of criticism, for lack of better words, toward the direction of one Maurice Okolie. We talked about his fight against Glowacki for the vacant WBO Cruiserweight title, the belt that Usyk gave up to move up to heavyweight, right? Well, we talked about how Okolie would win. We just thought he would win ugly because, let's face it, and I will stay, and I'll continue to say this: he's not the most. His style is not that doesn't provide that much pleasure to the eye. However, I do have to say, in watching this fight, he was fairly entertaining. Let's face it, this dude is 6'5", 200 pounds. He's built like a basketball player. He doesn't want to get on the inside at all. But against Glowacki, he used that height and he used that reach to great effect for the first 3 rounds. In round 4, he found a home for that right hand, and once that punch landed, good night, Irene. I have to give credit what is due. Uh, I'm not going to say he just all of a sudden turns into the exciting fighter. He's the cruiserweight version of Tommy Hearns, but uh, he did the job in this fight. I have to give it to him.
He did. And, I think it was in part that he found another gear. Maybe he was inspired because of the challenge in front of him. But I also have to say, I've always been a fan of Krzysztof Glowacki, and he looked terrible in this fight. He just looked awful. So sometimes you have the intersection of, one guy's graph going up while the other guy's graph's coming down, and they meet at that, intersection, that X point. And it's good news for the guy whose graph is ascending, Okolie in this case. Not so good news for the guy who's, on the downside, and that would have been Glowacki. But still, take nothing away. Okolie had a very good performance when it counted in the spotlight. Let the hype begin. And if it was another more competitive division, I'd be throwing cold water all over it. But, cruiserweight, there's a lane to success for him there. It's not horribly competitive right now. Guys have either moved up to heavyweight, in a case of a guy like Usyk. And there's real potential there for him. So good for him. Congrats. The British fighters continue to have a really nice success. And the wonderful thing for the British fighters is they get tremendous fan success. Are you listening, America?
I'll go to you, Daniel. A quick word on this fight.
I only saw the highlights, and oh man, I feel bad for Glowacki, like to go out the way he did. But it's inevitable for a lot of fighters. I don't think he really, really recovered just by how bad that Bradis fight ended. But good on, like I said, good on Okolie. He did the job. He did what he was supposed to do and went to it. And Gayle, you are perfectly right into it because prior to the fight, as they were doing the undercard on the zone, you saw hype packages from previous British cruiserweights hyping up Lawrence, maiming him like he's going to be the next great one, the next great heavyweight. So yeah, they're putting a lot of their things in that area, and it's a division where it's going to be pretty open, especially if you go to WBC side where Mauricio Suleiman seems to have lost his mind, but that's gonna be a decent way to look into it. Now, the only thing that can change is if Usyk just decides I'm done. I don't want to be chasing Joshua forever and going back down to cruiserweight. Then at that point, I get everything's academic.
Yeah, pretty much everything will I think Okolie's shooting to fight Bradis, who has one of the belts there at 200 pounds. Or if no, that's Bridger weight. I'm sorry, that's that nonsense Bridger weight. I was thinking Oscar Rivas, but he's at that Bridger weight. I think it is whatever they want to call it, that trumped up division made by the WBC. But yeah, overall good win, and if it leads to a unification bout at cruiserweight, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not mad at it. The Brits would love it. It will be good from a financial perspective for Okolie. So, yeah. So I'll leave him alone for now. I'll give him his flowers for this fight. But if he turns in a sticker, and the next time I'll be right on him. Let's move on to some news here. I'll go to you. I'll leave the floor to you, Daniel and Gayle. If there's any news stories you want to provide or want to talk about, please do.
I'm going to jump in and follow our kind words about the DAZN card, the performance of Vergil Ortiz Jr., Seniesa Estrada, and some damn good fights on the undercard, including some Lopez on Lopez violence between two welterweights, one from Argentina and one from Mexico, with potentially the Argentinian being a future opponent for Ortiz Jr. So keep an eye on that, Marcelino Lopez. Then we come to today, and the latest in Twitter trash talk flame wars from Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy boxing promoter, throwing shade at DAZN because apparently none of the DAZN executives were in attendance at the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas over the weekend for the fight, nor have any of them congratulated him for the card that he put on. Really? Really, Oscar, that's the first thing you have to say on Monday after a successful card with a sellout of the limited attendance permitted at the Dickies Arena, just shy of 6,000, all sold out. It sounded like a full house. They were roaring. In fact, they were so behind Ortiz Jr. that when Maurice Hooker was interviewed in the ring after the fight, they were booing him, and he basically told them all to go F themselves and left on the broadcast. So good for Hooker for standing up for himself. But Oscar, really, if you're butthurt over this, have words with DAZN privately. DAZN has new management, by the way, and this is not the introduction to the new leadership team at DAZN now that John Skipper is gone. So, not a good look.
What is Oscar doing?
Well, maybe Oscar just wants to get on the ground floor of the burgeoning Metal Art Network that John Skipper is heading with Dan Le Batard. But
for Pete's sake, he's better off going to Triller if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, but to me that Oscar thing, it's just like it's kind of like a subtweet in a way. Like, you're not really talking to DAZN. You're not really talking in that area. You're shooting shots at Eddie because at a certain point, people start equating DAZN with Eddie Hearn, with Matchroom. and he's trying. Maybe there's a little subtweeting saying that there's some favoritism there, especially like I said when we talked about last week about Canelo deciding to make Eddie Hearn his promoter. So there may be some little shots there and some pettiness, but that's Oscar being Oscar. Like we have to get. I'm already used to Oscar saying outlandish shit, for lack of a better term, from time to time when it comes into it, when things don't completely go his way. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, for the crowd that you had and the type of event that you were putting on, that was, for all intents and purposes, a success. Because not only did you see that, okay, Vergil is on the cusp of being world caliber, you have Seniesa, who's now a champion. You have this situation with Seniesa and Marlon that's still happening, even though Marlon is clearly no longer probably interested as far as weight. So that's just bad. That's just like I said, pettiness. Like you're gonna get that in many ways. Like if you're gonna talk about something, talk about okay that you made the fight, or talk about the schedule for the Munguia Selecki fight that you made April 24th. You're gonna get that. Or people want to talk about recent things. There's the fact that Tank Davis now faces some 14 counts in that hit and run that he had earlier. That's a lot of charges for a hit and run. But other than the news, there's really luckily not out there. The only thing that's somewhat coming into it is just people trying to hype up, like I said, the Fury Wilder fight, which by the way still has no venue, still has no date. And the only other thing was they're narrowing down the site for Ramirez Taylor. We all know it's going to be in Vegas, but they don't know when.
Yeah, he's complaining and subtweeting about Hearn. My thing is, okay, boo down who? So what if Hearn wasn't there? So what if real representatives from DAZN wasn't there? My thing is, Oscar, sir, if it wasn't for DAZN, where would Golden Boy be in the biggest picture right now? You still mad that Canelo still has a relationship with Hearn, and basically to give him two middle fingers to you? Look in the mirror, because that's your own doing. You got, at the very least, a very, very popular figure in Ryan Garcia, who's making not only inroads in the ring, he's especially making them outside the ring. And you're coming off of the success of an Ortiz who has the look of being a burgeoning star, right? Lean on that. Use that to build your brand up. Don't sit there and be throwing these side shots at them when you riding when clearly the wave of momentum was on Golden Boy's side following following that Ortiz fight. If anything, get back on the grind and find the Vergil Ortiz at featherweight. Find him at flyweight. Find him at middleweight. Do that instead of doing all this other stuff. He should know. He should know, and is too experienced in the game to be this petty, folks. I don't get it.
Let me add a footnote. It looks like Taylor and Ramirez is going to be May 22nd in Vegas, outside the bubble, however. So keep an eye on tickets for sale.
That's a good thing. Yeah. Ooh, that is interesting. I wonder how many UK fans are going to be are allowed to travel.
Well, they have still continued to have lockdown issues, and May 22nd, that is exactly 2 months from today. So potentially limited travel, probably much easier for them to come this way than for Americans to go that direction. So potentially possible. And Can you imagine if that is the first opportunity they've got to be ringside at a fight? Those folks love to travel, love to support their fighters. They're going to finally be let out of their cage. They're locked down.
Yeah, about 3/4 of them are going to be drunk at ringside. So
now that's no different than normal. So they they support their folks. That honestly is the best thing that could possibly happen to that fight.
indeed, absolutely, I agree 100%. I'll go to you, Daniel. Any other news? Any news bits that you have in the queue?
I said nothing much. Nothing much. Like as far as boxing wise, like except actually in the ring, everything else is either entertainment or legal issues. Like we mentioned, like between Tank getting hit with 14 charges and apparently now becoming a limited. Now the biopic becoming a limited series for Mike Tyson. Pretty much not a lot other than Peter Khan being named as chief boxing officer of Triller.
With that being the case, let's move on to preview some fights here, and we talked about this before the show. Let's talk into some in terms of Amanda Serrano. She will fight. What's the network? What's the streaming service again, Gayle?
Amanda Serrano is headlining a card from Puerto Rico on Ring City, USA. That is the promoter agnostic sort of NBC's version of Showbox, if you will. And they are midweek fights, either Wednesdays or Thursdays. And let me double check so I give you all the right 411 folks. And this is actually going to be Thursday night, the 25th.
Yeah, another fight we forgot to talk about that we omitted. My mistake on that. Alberto Machado. Speaking of Ring City,
Right.
He fought on there last week. Late substitute against a Mexican fighter, was successful early, but this is beginning to be a disturbing pattern about Alberto Machado, where he fades late, and he faded a bit later in this fight. In the end, he got dropped hard in the 8th round. Gayle, Daniel, for anybody who wants to respond, we both heard that even though this fight was at 135 pounds, Machado formerly was a world champion at 130. He had issues making the weight. He always seems to tire in bouts, and his chin is becoming more and more leaky. Given this result, is it time that someone have a talk with Machado and maybe discuss whether he should continue on, because this wasn't good, and again, a disturbing pattern here.
Well, forget Machado for just a second. Let us celebrate Angel Fierro from Tijuana, who is trained under El Terrible himself, Eric Morales, was training for another fight, took this fight on 6 days' notice, got his ass from Tijuana to Puerto Rico successfully. He did the media Zoom presser from the passenger seat of a car. I think he was on his way to the airport. It was that last minute. And he got dropped by Machado in the first round. He popped right back up. He got dropped again in the second round, and we're all saying, okay, fine, right, okay, last minute substitute, some young kid from Tijuana. This 22-year-old refused to back down, stayed in the fight, overcame those two knockdowns in rounds 1 and 2, when you would assume that, being blasted by a former champion like that, you collect your paycheck and you go home and chalk it up to a learning experience. No, he kept at it. He kept at Machado. And as we know, after having lost twice to Andrew Cancio due to body shots, it's often said of fighters they don't like body shots. Well, come on. No fighter likes to be hit by a body shot. But Machado just folds, hit by a really well-placed body shot, especially after somebody's been an offensive-minded fighter coming at him. And that's exactly what Fierro did. Finally, I believe it was the 7th round, he slammed Machado with a picture-perfect body shot. He nearly blasted him all the way out of the ring. And Machado was done. And with that, this 22-year-old from Tijuana, who had to go there without his trainer, he just went with his chief second. Nobody else came with him, performed beautifully. And by the end of that fight, you would have thought that fight was taking place in Mexico. What crowd was there? There were no fans technically allowed, but it was outdoors and there were people there. They were cheering for Fierro. Good for him. He was elated. There was a little minor strap on the line, but he's fired up. He's excited and he's ready to move forward. He's only got 1 loss on his record. And, I think that Eric Morales has a tiger by the tail with this kid. Now let's go around to Machado. Boy, this was just bad. There's just no good way to position this at all. Machado has been moving up in weight. It didn't help him at all. It really should have made him at least sturdier. He will still get fights, under Miguel Cotto's banner. That does protect him and give him a brand name. But he has really got to go back, look at this fight, think very carefully about what happened. He's going to end up in gatekeeper land if he can't figure out how to fix what was wrong. But all due credit to Fierro. Had he not willed himself to continue after 2 knockdowns, we wouldn't even be talking about this. And let's give credit where it's due as well to the matchmaking that's being done on Ring City. We have seen great fight after great fight, some with names we know, a lot that we don't. There have been almost no blowouts. They've all been entertaining. That's the doing of Ring City's VP of Operations, who's the matchmaker, and that's Sam Katkowski. A lot of people know him, especially in California, because he's run the former Wild Card West gym, now called Churchill's. And he was for a time Regis Prograis manager. So he clearly knows talent and how to put fights together. And so far, Ring City has been sensational. I urge you all to start setting a reminder on your calendar for Ring City, which is usually either a Wednesday or Thursday night on NBC Sports Network in the United States. And there is another card this Thursday.
Your thoughts on this fight with Machado, Daniel, quickly, and do you share Gayle's enthusiasm in terms of Ring City?
Ring City is in many ways picking up a slack. What's been left behind a little bit by, like I said, the ESPN Friday Night Fights area. Not so much like, okay, you're not getting world caliber fights, but those fights early in the week where that you're getting a bigger chance. It's not going to be a major world title, but it's a good step up card. Like, you need something else because Showbox can't carry it all. And so it's really helping out in that area. And remember, folks, once NBCSN shuts down, because unfortunately Comcast is shutting down that channel, you will be able to catch Ring City USA. I know we do streaming services, but on the Peacock network. So it's not going to die whether after NBCSN shuts down the stores. As far as this fight, I feel bad for it. I really do feel bad a little bit for Machado because the pattern just keeps showing up. Like he's a front runner, that he can't take body shots, that he can't handle the weight at this point. It was a trouble already when it was at 130, and that Concacio caught him almost at a perfect time, right when he's on the cusp of like trying to get into the main picture. And he's either probably going to remain a gatekeeper status, somebody that that's going to be giving you a different picture as far as a tall, lanky fighter in that class, or it really does really have to start thinking about his future, because it's one thing to lose, but a pattern of losses that build up it starts getting worrying at this point.
Worrisome indeed, and yeah, worrisome indeed, and just not just to your point, Daniel. It's not just that he's losing; it's the way he's losing. Um, Serious reevaluation in terms of his career, how he's training, um, his conditioning, just everything across the board. Uh, because if it's like this, I don't think he should continue fighting. It's not worth it, and it's damaging from a mental and particularly a physical a standpoint. You don't want to ever see a fighter to get hurt, and there are warning signs in watching him perform that says that he's going to end up long term getting really really hurt, and that's nothing that no one wants in this sport, particularly that has so many risks and can be so dangerous. Um, Getting back to the Serrano fight in our previews, for anybody who wants to talk about an upcoming fight, look, we all know last year there was a lot of talk about her fighting Katie Taylor. Um, it didn't happen. It is my belief it's largely on Team Serrano's part that the fight didn't happen with Katie Taylor. Well, uh, she's moving. She won a belt at featherweight. She has two belts at featherweight. She's defending those titles against um, sister by the name of Bermudez in San Juan on NBCSN. For those who've seen Bermudez, some insight on her and your thoughts on this fight overall.
Well, let's admit it. You're right. It's not the fight everyone really wants to. Part of the reason that Serrano and Taylor didn't make their fight is that as part of the pandemic, um, and Serrano's inability to get some fights, she took a reality TV show assignment in Mexico, kind of a real world sort of thing. And it put a wrench into scheduling dates with Taylor. They had talked about her being part of the Fight City outdoor fight camp that Matchroom was putting together. She wasn't available during that stretch of dates. The Matchroom folks accused Serrano of ducking, and there were words between Serrano's promoter Lou DiBella and Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. Got real ugly. So here we are, waiting for that super fight. However, having just praised the matchmaking, the fight with Daniela Bermudez is not a bad fight. She is a 2-division title holder. Serrano's going to defend both her featherweight straps, the WBO strap, WBC strap. Bermudez is a veteran of the women's game, 23, 3-3 with 10 knockouts. Serrano, however, is a blaster, just like Seniesa Estrada is. When you see a woman's record that's 39-1-1 with 29 knockouts, that might as well be a 100% knockout ratio for the women. So never mind, Bermudez will be competitive from a skill point of view. She is not a threat power-wise at all to Serrano. So I expect Serrano to come right at her and give her all she can handle. We'll see how Bermudez holds up. Bermudez is from Argentina, who tends to turn out very good, serviceable women's fighters. They never embarrass themselves. However, I think this is just going to be too much for Bermudez. But it should be entertaining to watch as long as it lasts.
That fight is going to take place Thursday on NBCSN. On Saturday the 27th, the rematch between Alexander Povetkin and Dillian Whyte. I'm going to get both of you into this conversation. Started with you, Daniel. Povetkin, August last year, scored one of the upsets of the year. It was interesting. He was losing the fight against Whyte, went down twice. I want to say in round 4. Then in round 5, Dillian Whyte, he's most susceptible to the uppercut, and he got caught with that punch. One shot, boom, put Dillian Whyte down and out. They were originally scheduled to fight in December. It got pushed back. because Povetkin having issues with COVID-19. He tested positive for it. Took him a while to recover. He's fully recovered, hopefully. They're going to fight a rematch. Is there danger, Daniel, that we could see a similar result? And what I mean by that is Whyte was pretty dominant that first fight until he got caught. Could you see a scenario in the same way, a rematch going in the same vein where Whyte is having his way, he's winning, he's dominant, he's having his way, but just all of a sudden, spur of the moment, he gets hit and puts out again?
Oh man, yeah, there's a danger of that because the weird part about the whole fight before that uppercut, Dillian Whyte I think was winning on the cards, so he was on his way to pretty much coast to victory, line himself up for another shot at AJ, and then that uppercut happened. And you have to mention it didn't only happen, like I said, those punches late in the round didn't only happen to him against Povetkin. It happened to him against Chisora, I think, too. In many ways, like Chisora needs to thank Dillian Whyte for reviving the vitality that he has in the heavyweight division still in the UK. So there's a worrisome there. Unless he's done a real fundamental change and making sure that he can take less uppercuts, there's always going to be that danger there. And say all we won't want to say about Povetkin regarding, the PDs and such. He is serviceable. He is skilled. He's not somebody that makes a lot of mistakes. You really have to outclass him in order for him to really lose, like Klitschko did or AJ did. So there's that danger there. Although I think this time I could probably see Dillian pulling it out.
In theory, Gayle, Whyte should learn from what caused him to get caught and make the adjustments and win this rematch, right? But again, I keep saying, this is the issue with uppercuts. Joshua finished him off with an uppercut. Oscar Rivas put him down with an uppercut. Joseph Parker caught him with uppercuts. I keep seeing him getting hit with this punch. And until I see something different, Povetkin, to Daniel's point, say what you want about the controversy with PEDs, this dude is a wily vet. And this dude is skilled for a heavyweight. I'm picking Whyte to win officially. However, I'm hesitant. It's a shaky prediction because Whyte could get hurt, and I keep seeing Dillian Whyte getting hit with the same punch over and over.
Yeah, I'm with you, Michael. It's the deja vu all over again issue with Whyte. I will tell anyone within the sound of my voice, do not bet any money on Whyte that you can't afford to lose, because there is every danger of him making exactly the same mistake he did the first time. Yeah, you're absolutely right as well about Povetkin's issues, but I've never seen Povetkin in better condition than he was for the first fight with Whyte. Just forget the age. When he appeared in the last news conference before the fight, I actually asked him about his age, and he just shrugged it off and said, hey, I'm in better shape now than I've ever been. I feel great. Training's been great. For some guys, the pandemic made them focus because they have nothing else to do. As long as they've got access to their regular team and facilities, more or less, they just lean into training. There's just no distractions. Maybe that was it. He looked good against Whyte. I think he'll look good again. Yeah, like I say, I'm very eager to see the fight because there's so much intrigue. I do feel terrible for Dillian Whyte. You know, he was just treated horribly, made to wait on the sidelines as the mandatory. You know, he just was done dirty. He finally gets in the ring and he ends up as the victim of last year's knockout of the year. I mean, it's the old saying, if you didn't have bad luck, you'd have no luck at all. And I can't help but think that's what's going to happen to him again Saturday. But that's what makes it intriguing. You know, on paper, he should win. In our heart, we think, well, damn, man, he got caught last time. I'm not sure there's any reason to think it couldn't happen again.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I'm going with White to win. I'm saying he, in my head says that he should win. My head says that he will win. But if I'm really
But
being
you're not betting
honest
any
with
money on
myself,
it, are you?
right? I'm not going to put any bets on it.
No,
So yeah,
I would not put money on him. But I agree with you for all those reasons and more.
And just an update on that, what you was mentioning about Gervonta Davis, because that was a little bit of breaking news. Daniel, just give some details regarding that.
All right, let me take a look here because this came in, I think, within the
Because I'm just
last
reading
couple
it right here.
hours.
I'm reading him right here myself. He's been charged with 14 counts of various traffic violations relating to an alleged hit and run in November 2020. Full press release that the Baltimore City State's Attorney Office put out today. And yeah, I'm just going to read through some of the things he's been charged with. 4 counts of failure to immediately return and remain at the scene of an accident involving bodily injury. That's 1 year. Failure of driver involved in accidents to render reasonable assistance to injured persons. Failure of vehicle driver involved in accidents to furnish required ID and license. Of vehicle driver involved in accidents to exhibit license to police. Failure to report to the nearest police station. Failure to locate and notify owner of unattended property of damage. Failure of driver to furnish required ID information in writing on unattended vehicle property. A person driving motor vehicle on highway on suspended license and privilege. Uh, Driving with a revoked license. Driving without required license. Failure to stop steadily, circle a red light signal.
Okay, shall we go on?
Yeah.
So,
And if all adds up, he could face possibly up to, I want to say,
well, they're
up
not
to
going to
7 years,
add. Yeah,
7 years in prison if he's found guilty.
that
Excuse
ain't.
me, that's my mic dropping. Guilty on
Yep.
all counts. Shout out to Bakari of Three Kings Boxing. He's getting ready to post a story on that on 3kingsboxing.com. So yeah, the trouble continues for one Gervonta Tank Davis.
Okay, so let me parse that a little bit. No, I'm not a criminal attorney or prosecutor. However, I worked in our district attorney's office in San Diego County for 8 years. What generally happens in a hit and run like that, if you'll notice all these counts, generally they all carry a year in custody, and depending on how seriously each one of them is, you could do your time locally or in the state pen, as they say. It gives the prosecutor the wiggle room. Those charges are all far less than if your hit and run involves a DUI. So what often happens is that somebody is involved in a hit and run and they've been driving drunk. It's far better for them legally to flee the scene. Am I saying that's what happened to Tank Davis? No, I am absolutely not saying that. I have no knowledge of it, no effing idea, none. However, let me repeat, generally speaking, when people flee the scene of a hit and run, it's because they were under the influence. and because or they're scared. Maybe they don't know for a fact it's better for them to leave and then take all these little charges about fleeing the scene, because frankly, under our legal system, they carry less penalty, which is, to me, really reprehensible, that someone takes off and they end up in a better legal position. Any attorney will tell you that, and then you turn yourself in later when you sobered up. So, it's a bad look for Gervonta, no matter how the hit and run happened, no matter whether he was sober as a judge. It's, for all the talent that young man has in the ring, he makes some very, very bad life decisions.
Oh, let's not even forget the other thing that he just waiting for him. We all remember that video where he had where he pretty much handled a woman in Miami. He's still waiting charges for that. That could be battery. And that's a very dangerous thing to play with, where you have a hit and run. I think the total charge is what, 7 years maximum?
Yeah.
Or at least those are the ones in Maryland. Battery in Florida with video evidence, you're looking at least, I think, a dime in the pen. But that's gonna be very, very muddy for Tank, especially when, like I said, everybody else in the lightweight division started to position themselves to make some money. He may be the one left out, but that could just be of his own doing.
Yeah, and we'll keep you updated on that developing story. More trouble, it seems, is hovering over Gervonta Davis. Hate to end, end the show on kind of that bad note, but sometimes that is the breaks. That is the breaks. I'll go to you, Gayle. Start the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gayle from Communities Digital News. Owner, creator, founder of the Falcon Valley Group. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media, and make sure to give a plug to the Falcon Valley Group for those who don't know what that is. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Falcon Valley Group is my San Diego-based public relations consulting firm. The skills that pay the bills while I am working as a boxing columnist for Communities Digital News. And let me tell you, it's far, far better to be a boxing columnist when it doesn't have to pay your mortgage, and you can do it simply for the love of the sport. And you hear me on the Power for Power Report every week. In between, you can read my work at COM Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com, and always a pleasure to appear on Michael's Pound for Pound Boxing Report.
And you can also hear Gayle every couple of weeks on TMZ Live, so be sure to check her out there as well. I'll go to you, Daniel. Daniel from the Inscriber, as well as for Boxing News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you and where can they hear you on the Inscriber / for Boxing News podcast.
We're trying to get the podcast ready for this Sunday. Like I said, it's been a busy, unfortunately, Sunday in the past couple of weeks, but definitely catch me on there. You can catch me on Twitter, Walkers99, RAWKUZ99. And definitely getting started, because not only is going to be that podcast, I think we're finally, the Inscriber itself, we're finally getting ready to fully launch an actual network for podcasting, which was going to cover all aspects of sports and lifestyle.
Indeed, absolutely, absolutely. For those who want to talk music, boxing, fitness, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said during the show, I'll not only in terms of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, I also am a senior writer for 3kingsboxing.com. You can check out my latest article on a young prospect who we've talked about briefly here on the show, Jesse Bam Rodriguez. Gayle is very excited about him. She's seen him in the gym. Correct me if I'm wrong. And even though he's a prospect, 13-0, he's already ranked number 2 by the WBO, number 3 by the WBA, 10 by the BC. Only 21 years old, product of San Antonio, being trained by Robert Garcia. Uh, Garcia also has mentioned that um, he believes that Rodriguez is his most talented fighter on his stable. Uh, he has the look. We didn't talk about him. We didn't talk about this guy, but um, I did a recap of British bantamweight Lee McGregor. He has the look of a potential champion at 118 pounds long term. Uh, Bam Rodriguez really has the look of a potential world champion. He currently fights right now at 108 pounds. He's already talking up a fight against WBO champion Elwin Soto. Uh, he does some things that you don't see from 10-year veterans. Bam, uh, I think if he gets a fight, a virtual fight with Elwin Soto, I will make a prediction right now. I think he beats him. And I think if everything goes the way that a lot of people, a lot of insiders believe it will for him, I think he will not only be a world champion at 108 pounds. I think he has this real potential to win belts at 112 or 115 pounds. I think he has that kind of talent. So be on the lookout for him and check out my write up, my article on him over at threekingsboxing.com. Got that out the way. If you want to find out all things about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the website is the place to go to, p4pboxing.com. Uh, on the top of on the opening page of the website, excuse me, p4pboxingreport.com is the link for the website. On the opening page of the website, you'll find links to where to find us on all available platforms that carry podcasts, your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify's, your Anchors, and everything in between. If you please make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow us on Spotify. Please make sure to leave a review and comments and questions. We love all content, all commentary on how to improve the show, um, what we do bad about the show, what we do good about the show. 5-star review will get read on on a future episode. You can also on the website check the bottom portion of the page to find us what for links to find us all over social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram right now. So yeah, we're just about everywhere. Links to where you can donate, links to my online coaching page. As I said earlier, I am an online health and wellness coach for Beachbody. Check out Beachbody on Demand for all fitness. If you're interested in getting your fitness game up, or if you're interested in 2 weeks of free workouts, because Beachbody on Demand offers 2-week trial throughout the year of free workouts, or if you're interested in my Let's Build Together group fitness challenge. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the Serrano fight, Amanda Serrano defending her featherweight titles. We will do a recap of Povetkin and Dillian Whyte, that rematch. And we'll do a preview of Tim Tszyu. We haven't talked about him much on the show. We have, a couple episodes here and there, but he's going to return to the ring to fight Dennis Hogan. Why is that important? Because Tim Tszyu is on the verge of a title shot at 154 pounds. And we'll do a preview of April 3rd bout. Jamel Herring, a fighter that Gayle, Daniel, and myself has talked to and interviewed privately. He's going to defend his WBO junior lightweight title against a former 122, 126 pound champ called Frampton. And on the undercard of that, wait for it, Daniel, the return of Donnie Nietes, former 108, 105, 108, 112, 115 pound champion. He has been on boxing's milk carton, wondering where has he been. He finally makes his return to the ring following a 2+ year layoff. Um, Going to fight on the undercard of that. So we will talk about all of those fights, and we will also, and so yeah, uh, the return of Nietes, Herring, Frampton. Um, Tim Tszyu will preview all of those fights. So, for Gayle from Communities Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber, and for Boxing News, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 319 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening, good night. And thoughts and prayers to those who suffered lost lives in another, sadly, another uh, case of a mass shooting here in the United States in Boulder, Colorado. As well, we're recording this show on March 22nd, and earlier today, and another fortunate incident happened there where multiple lives were lost. And our thoughts and prayers and our condolences to those who lost their lives in that sad incident. So yeah, episode 319. We will see you guys next time. Have a good evening. Good night.